Okay, juniors, we're coming back to that problem we were just working on with copper and sulfur. And the last thing that we did was we said that how much sulfur do we need? So let's zoom in here on the board. And this is where we were at. When I plugged that into my calculator, I came up with 20 grams of sulfur that I would need for all 80 grams of copper. Well, I look up in my problem and I was given 25 grams of sulfur. So I actually have more sulfur available than I need. And I ask myself, do I have that much? I have more than that. So sulfur becomes the excess reactant and copper becomes the limiting reactant. I'm going to run out of copper first. Now you might ask, Mrs. Alexander, what if I had selected to start with sulfur instead of starting with copper? Let's go ahead and try that first quickly. If I had started with 25 grams of sulfur, then I would ask myself, how many grams of copper do I need to react with that? And we would do a factor label table very similar to the one we just did with copper, except I drop my grams of sulfur down and go to moles of sulfur, drop my moles of sulfur down and go to moles of copper, drop my moles of copper down and go to grams of copper. Writing in my numbers for this plan then, I use the molar mass, and the molar mass of copper is 63.5 according to the periodic table, and the molar mass of sulfur is 32.1, and my mole ratio is just flipped. 2 moles of copper to 1 mole of sulfur. And when I plug this into my calculator, and you can go ahead and pause and do so, but it comes out to be about 99 grams of copper. And guess what? I don't have 99 grams of copper. I only have 80 grams of copper. So still, copper is the limiting reactant, and sulfur is the excess reactant. So it didn't matter which one of those amounts you started with. You will always end up with the correct limiting reactant. Now getting back to our problem solving, it said that the third step was this: determine the limiting reactant, which we did, and use it to solve for the amount of product. Well, I know that copper is my limiting reactant. And I'm not going to use the 99 grams of copper that I just solved for, because I don't have that much. If I look up in the problem, I only have 80 grams of copper. So I'm going to come down here and I'm going to go 80 grams of copper. And how many grams, and my product in this case was copper 2 sulfide. Excuse me, copper 1 sulfide. There we go, right. And so it's a mass problem. And I'm going to go ahead and drop grams of copper down and go to moles of copper. Drop moles of copper down and go to moles of my product. And my product is copper 1 sulfide. Copper 1 sulfide. Drop my moles of copper 1 sulfide down and go to grams of copper 1 sulfide. And so here are the same numbers we previously used for molar mass of copper. My ratio of copper 1 sulfide to copper looks like it's 2 to 1 on the copper side. 2 coppers to 1 sulfide. And my molar mass, when I plug this into my calculator, I come up with a molar mass of 159.1. And then when I plug that into my calculator, and you guys can go ahead and do so, but you'll see that, you know what, if you use 80 grams of copper, you're going to use all that up, you're going to use your grams of sulfur, but you're going to have sulfur left over. You're only going to use about 20 grams of sulfur, and you're going to make 100.2 grams of copper 1 sulfide. Now, just kind of recapping this and getting ready for tomorrow. Need to zoom out a little bit there. Hopefully you can compare this to our recipe analogy that we did. If we're trying to make chocolate chip cookies and I have 6 cups of flour and 4 eggs, which one of those ingredients is going to determine how many cookies we can make? In the analogy on the board, we said you had 25 grams of sulfur and 80 grams of copper. And we found out that, copper is the ingredient or the reactant we're going to run out of first. And then we use that limiting reactant, right down here at the bottom, we use that limiting reactant to determine how much product we can make. And we found out that if you use 80 grams of copper, you're going to make about a little over 100 grams of your product, of your copper 1 sulfide. Hopefully these notes help you. And tomorrow in class, we will practice solving limiting reactant problems.